Hey, everybody, and welcome to another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to tackle a question that I think is on a lot of people's minds when they're thinking about, doing some outdoor living projects. And that is, you know, how long does it take to build a deck? How long does it take a contractor to build a deck?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one that there's no easy answer to it. How long does it take a contractor to build a deck?
Yeah, I was thinking about it the other day, and it's kind of like, how long does it take to build a house? Well, it depends, is it a mansion or is it a tiny house?
Exactly. Yeah, there are so many factors that go into it. You can't just throw out a number, and it's important to really understand those variables so you can plan effectively.
Okay, so no magic number.
Hmm.
But luckily, we've got a fantastic resource to help us break it all down. We're looking at insights from Green Exterior Remodeling, and they're a very well-respected deck builder in Charlotte, North Carolina. And their blog has a great post that I think really clarifies a lot of this stuff for us. How long does it take a contractor to build a deck?
Absolutely, and they emphasize that it's not just about the raw time it takes. It's about understanding those factors. Once you do that, you can maybe even speed things up a little bit.
I love that. Efficient and informed.
Yep.
So, all right, let's get into it. First up, size. Makes sense. A bigger deck is going to take more time. But what kind of scale are we talking about here? How long does it take a contractor to build a deck?
Well, they give some good examples. Imagine a simple rectangular deck, pretty standard. That might take a crew about a week to build.
Okay.
But now picture a multi-level deck with built-in benches, planters, maybe even a pergola
Oh, wow, yeah.
that could easily add weeks onto the project.
So our listeners out there picturing, their dream backyard oasis, they really do need to factor in that extra time right from the beginning. How long does it take a contractor to build a deck? What about materials? Did those make a difference in how long it takes a contractor to build a deck?
Huge difference. So let's start with the classic, pressure-treated wood. It's common, but each board needs to be cut and fastened individually. Now, consider composite or PVC decking. These often come in prefabricated sections.
Oh, interesting.
Faster installation.
So even though those might be a little more expensive, you might actually save time with those higher-end materials. Interesting. How long does it take a contractor to build a deck?
Exactly. It's a trade-off to consider. And then you've got the exotic hardwoods like ipe or teak.
Beautiful stuff.
Gorgeous, but dense and heavy. More prep time needed.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Does that affect how long it takes a contractor to build a deck?
Absolutely. They might need pre-drilling, specialized fasteners. It all adds up.
Okay, so we've got size and materials. Now let's talk about the people actually doing the building. Does the contractor's experience level actually play a role in how long it takes a contractor to build a deck?
Oh, it's huge. A skilled, well-coordinated crew is like a pit crew at a race. They know their roles, they anticipate each other's moves, and they work fast.
Makes sense. Fewer fumbles, fewer do-overs, things just click into place.
Exactly. And speaking of things that can slow you down, permits. Can't forget about those. How long does it take a contractor to build a deck?
Oof, the dreaded permits. All right, let's talk about that. How much time can those add to a project? How long does it take a contractor to build a deck?
Well, that's the tricky part. Permits can be a real wild card.
Oh, yeah.
They could take anywhere from a week to even a month or more.
Oh, wow.
It really depends on your location and how busy your local building department is.
You could have everything ready to go and then just be stuck waiting on paperwork.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that there's a lot of hurry up and wait involved in construction projects, but a good contractor will know all the ins and outs of the permit process and can really help to expedite things.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, okay, we've covered size, materials, the contractor's experience, and then these ever unpredictable permits. That's a lot of moving parts. Is there any way for our listener to get some sort of general sense of how long this whole thing might take? How long does it take a contractor to build a deck?
Well, Green Exterior Remodeling, the source we're looking at, they actually lay out a pretty typical timeline.
Okay.
So the first phase is design and planning, which they say usually takes between 1 and 3 weeks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What?
You don't want to rush to the design phase.
Exactly. Then there's permit approval, which, as we just talked about, can be anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. And then finally, we get to the actual construction phase, which they say takes another 1 to 3 weeks.
So potentially we're looking at well over a month, even if everything goes perfectly smoothly. Are there any tips from our source on how to speed things up? How long does it take a contractor to build a deck?
They do have some great advice. First, streamline that design. The simpler the shape and the fewer bells and whistles you've got, the faster the build is going to be.
I guess that minimalist aesthetic is useful for something.
Right. Another tip is to pre-order your materials. That way, once construction starts, you're not waiting around on deliveries and stuff.
That's really smart. So planning and preparation are key here.
Absolutely. And of course, circling back to what we talked about before, an experienced contractor can make a world of difference in keeping things on schedule.
Now, you mentioned that Green Exterior Remodeling is based in Charlotte, North Carolina. Does the actual location play a role in how long it takes to build a deck? Like, do some areas have faster permit processes or anything like that? How long does it take a contractor to build a deck?
That's a great question. And while the article doesn't really delve into any regional differences, it's probably safe to assume that building codes and permit processes can vary quite a bit from place to place.
That's a good point. So if our listeners really concerned about time, it might be worth checking into those local regulations early on. But
Yeah.
let's be real here. It's not just about how long it takes. What about the elephant in the room, the cost? How can our listeners get a handle on, the financial side of this whole project? How long does it take a contractor to build a deck?
That's $1 million question, isn't it? And unfortunately, this particular source really only focuses on the timeline, not so much on the budget.
Okay, so we've got the timeline down, but the budget is a whole other animal.
Oh.
Maybe that's a deep dive for another day.
I'm in. I think costs are always super fascinating to dig into.
Totally. But getting back to our current deep dive, I think there's a really key takeaway here for our listener. What would you say is the most important thing to remember when you're thinking about a deck building project? How long does it take a contractor to build a deck?
I would say it's this. Building a deck is not an overnight project. There are multiple stages involved, and each one has the potential for delays. So being aware of those potential hiccups and planning accordingly can really save you a lot of frustration later on.
Yeah, that's so important. It's about setting those realistic expectations right from the start. And, speaking of setting yourself up for success, I think we got to give another shout out to Green Exterior Remodeling in Charlotte. Their expertise really shows in their blog posts. They clearly know their stuff.
Absolutely. If you're in the Charlotte area and thinking about a deck, they are definitely worth checking out. But honestly, the insights that we've talked about today, they really apply no matter where you are.
So true. Planning, preparation, and choosing a great contractor. Those are universal keys to a successful project. So to sum it all up, listeners out there, be patient, be prepared, and most importantly, choose your contractor wisely. How long does it take a contractor to build a deck? With the right planning, you might be sipping lemonade on that new deck sooner than you think.
Yeah, and remember, the journey is part of the fun too. Enjoy that whole process from sketching out your dream design to that first step you take onto the finished deck.
How long does it take a contractor to build a deck?
Thinking about that whole process, something strikes me. We've talked about, how long it physically takes to build the thing, but we haven't really touched on all the other stuff that takes time too. All the behind the scenes stuff.
Oh, yeah. What do you mean?
Well, I'm talking about all the research that goes into finding a good contractor, like Green Exterior Remodeling. You got to compare quotes, make design choices, maybe even deal with HOA approvals. And that stuff takes time and energy too.
Yeah.
How long does it take a contractor to build a deck?
You're so right. It's like an iceberg,
Yeah.
The actual construction is just what you see above the water,
Mm.
but there's this whole hidden mass of time and energy that you've got to invest below the surface.
Exactly. And those hidden costs, not just financial ones, but in terms of effort and stress, those can really add up if you aren't prepared. Absolutely. It's something I think every homeowner needs to factor in. Thinking holistically about the whole project, both the seen and the unseen aspects, that's how you set yourself up for a good experience.
That's a great way to put it. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. How long does it take a contractor to build a deck? We've explored those practical things that can influence the timeline, but also those less obvious things that can affect the whole process too.
Yeah, and hopefully our listeners feel a little more prepared now to embark on their own deck building adventures. How long does it take a contractor to build a deck? It's about going in with realistic expectations, knowing what to expect, and choosing the right people to guide you along the way.
Couldn't agree more. And hey, if it all feels overwhelming, just remember, there are experts out there. How long does it take a contractor to build a deck? Like Green Exterior Remodeling. They can help you navigate every step of the way.
Exactly. Let them handle the heavy lifting, literally and figuratively.
Love it. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this journey into the world of deck building. Remember, patience, preparation, and a great contractor are your keys to success.
And don't forget to have some fun along the way. Happy deck building, everyone.